For tonight, our guest is Tad Oviatt
Yes.
with ParkENT Cycles. So without further ado, I want to be respectful of everyone's time. We're going to jump in and have Tad tell us a little bit about his company. We're going to start with a video.
Yeah, I'll show you a video of the actual product working, because being a new product is actually kind of hard for people to understand what it looks like, how it works and everything. We like to say that it hugs your bike, but sometimes that doesn't quite get across what it is. So I have a short video here that I'm going to play on a bit of a loop. And what it is one of the demos we did where it actually has the unit out in public, and this person has put his bicycle into it. He's checked the spokes for clearance, mainly because when he activates it using a key card, which you can also use a cell phone, it puts a metal bar through the actual spokes of the wheel. And as he's activated, the arms that come down, you know, you see as he pushes it through there, it kind of gates open so you can push the bicycle in. Well, there are bars actually in the arms that come down and stop that gated motion from happening to form a nice solid L. And that way it actually forms a metal bar through the frame of the bicycle. So it locks not only the wheel, but the frame of the bicycle as well. And that's key for anybody riding around on a bicycle. You want to lock up everything when you get there. So I mean, normally you have one of these type of locks. Everybody has them, everybody's known about them, and they're really great. But the problem is that they're super easy to break through and tear apart and everything. This one took me about 20 seconds with a Sawzall. It just shows that the bike lock industry has not kept up with the power tool industry. And I can go down to Ace Hardware, I can go down to anywhere and just go ahead and pick up a power tool, bring it out, battery powered even, and tear these things apart. Now people are like, well, this is a, you know, steel cable, big deal. You can easily take through one of these things. I also have one of the top of the line U-locks. This one took about 20 seconds to go through with a Sawzall. Now people are wondering, you know, well but it's got the hardened steel on it, you know, there's no reason I should be able to break through this. It's like, well, this part here may be hardened, but that's just regular steel on this stuff. So you can saw through these things, no problem. And it's gotten to the point now where thieves have even started sawing through the bike racks themselves and then taping them up afterwards, just because they know people will lock to it, so they'll just tear apart the bike rack.
Right, well, I think you made a really great point, is that I don't think that the bike lock industry has kept up with the power tool industry or the expensive nature of the bikes. I mean, because the bikes themselves are not, they're like instruments now. They're not like they used to be. They're not like your dad's Swing. You know, you can get bikes that are graphite. You could easily spend $1,000. And as I mentioned to Tab, my oldest son is in college now, and I think the lowest bike that you can get is like $400. And that's like maybe 2 or 3 bikes out of the selection of several hundred, and the rest of them are $700, $800.
Yeah, Walmart bikes.
Those are Walmart bikes. They range from the $400 bicycle you do get at Walmart all the way up to $7,000 easily. Some parts alone that I found out recently, some parts alone are worth $4,000 a piece.
Agreed.
And those are the gears, the shafts and everything. And it's a situation where the bike lock industry has not, because the bike racks don't lock up your bikes. The bike locks lock up your bikes. But it hasn't progressed past the horse and hitch days.
Right.
It's been that same way for millennia. It hasn't changed really at all.
Right.
So with this product, we're putting it out there saying, now we need to have infrastructure out there that'll actually secure your property, because even in parking lots, they'll say, don't leave valuable property inside your cars, because your cars lock up.
Right.
But the bicycle is your valuable property. And to a lot of people, it's their mode of transportation. So now they're having to trust their mode of transportation to a thin piece of metal twine or, you know, braided cable or something. And it's just one where if we can make gated enclosures so cars can't leave, if we can make other situations where vehicles will stay safe, why don't we make an infrastructure so that bicycles as well can stay safe? And it's a hard thing to do because of the nature of a bicycle itself. It's an entirely custom market.
Agreed. I mean, it's really interesting to have you here, because the way you're describing the challenge that your product addresses really kind of gets to the heart of the startup value proposition. You know, in a lot of instances when you talk about the way the design process, you almost want to start with the problem you're going to solve in order to actually have a successful product development cycle. And as you describe this, I mean, there's clearly several gaps here in terms of the lock suppliers, the quality of the bikes, because again, you mentioned the bike has turned into this component, and each of the elements associated, the wheels cost a couple of hundred, the gears. So now, what were some of the challenges? I mean, how did you arrive at this place? I mean, because that's as you described it, it doesn't sound like your pitch has been one that came, it sounds like you learned as you were making your pitch. Yeah. So could you tell us a little bit about the evolution of the ParkENT?
Sure thing, Michael. This was the old college project, you know, and it was a friend of mine in college, Georgia Southern University. He had 2 bicycles stolen in a week. And this guy had like $1,000 road bikes. First time he had the U-lock, the second time he was only able to get the chain. But the kicker is that when the second one was stolen, the bike thefts being brazen that they were like, holy crap, this guy keeps putting bicycles out there, left a sticky note on the cut bike lock chain with a smiley face and thanks written on it. Just because they're like, this is the second one, why would he keep doing this? And I wanted to help out a friend.
Right.
So back in the college days, and I was coming up on senior design and I needed a project to be able to do, so I'm like, I'll take this on, we'll see what happens.
Okay.
And then it was one of those where it grew in that situation where I took things home, built processes, and I was still in the college experience, still in the college mindset. So for me, it was just a project.
Okay.
It was just something to do. But in the same situation, it actually ended up paying for 2 master's degrees for me.
Is that right?
Yeah, well, I studied first computer engineering at Georgia Tech.
Okay.
And then got an electrical engineering degree from Georgia Southern.
Okay.
And it was during that I kind of thought of this idea. And then they started 2 master's courses and wanted these senior graduating engineers to stay on for masters. So I was like, hey, you know, I'll do that. And can I just keep working on my project? Because I've already got some work done on it. And they're like, sure, no problem. We'll pay for your tuition just because you're the inaugural class. And I was like, okay, anytime someone can pay for your master's degree, do it. And
wow, that's a great, pretty fortuitous timing.
And it was only at the end of that first master's degree that I actually was in contact with the MBA professor, who was the entrepreneurship professor.
Got it.
And said, you know, we really like what you're doing. We want you to keep working on it. You know, we don't want you to stay on for an MBA, and I'm making my graduate assistant.
Wow.
My thing, get it in, I need that in writing. Like immediately, I need that in writing.
Absolutely.
So then I went on, did my MBA, and I built out the business, because I was an engineer. I didn't know practically anything about business. Still are an engineer. Yeah. But I didn't know anything about business, and I was just like, you know, sure, whatever. You know, you're gonna pay for it, fine. And then I did what a lot of college graduates do, and they get out and they work.
Right.
Yeah, worked at a big corporation, contract worker, programming, and that's when I got a phone call on the ride home that said, "Don't come into work tomorrow. You're out. You're done." We downsized, basically. You know.
Wow.
And I was like, well, darn, what do I do now? And that's when this whole idea of bike renting showed up.
Okay.
And I was like, well, that thing I did in college, that would work with that too. So
when you say bike renting, it's similar to like the Zip car. It's
similar, yeah.
A subscription kind of service where you have the bikes. Because I know in Chicago, my hometown, down by the lakefront, they have racks of bikes that
it was when that was first getting started. And I was seeing how much it was taking off, and I was like, wow, that's actually something, maybe I can do something there. And that's when I decided to kind of say, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go in on this and see how far I can go, because I didn't know at that point in time. First thing I had to do was to sell my father on it.
Okay.
And he's a salesman, has been for 30 years. So selling him on this idea was quite difficult. Okay. But realizing that at some point down the line, I'm going to have to sell to universities, municipalities, all that kind of stuff, might help to have somebody who's done that stuff before.
Absolutely.
And then I reached out into the Atlanta area and saying, what can I do to learn about entrepreneurism and stuff? What can I do to figure out what I'm going to do? And that's when I came across the Advanced Technology Development Center, the ATDC, and went through their courses and everything and trying to figure out what to do. And through contacts in there, was able to find out about something called the Georgia Tech Capstone Design Program,
right?
Which is $8,000, and you get 5 engineers to work on your project.
You've won. I mean, you've won. I mean, I've seen your product and your process.
Yeah.
You've won a couple of these contests. You've participated in a lot of pitch programs.
Yeah.
I mean, what was that like?
It was one of those situations where you basically get put in front of a room of people. Suddenly you have to do something, and at the same point in time, you're talking to serial entrepreneurs. You're talking to people who have done it before, and saying, when I get put in front of a group of people, what do I do? Who do I talk to? How do I get that? How do I get the right words to say? Because my pitch, which from people from the Alpharetta ATDC circle can totally back this up. My pitch originally was probably one of the worst things you ever heard in your life. I got this thing that locks bikes up with stuff.
Right. Well, the startup market has been glamorized,
Yeah.
so people think it's kind of like, everything is going to be like Facebook.
Oh yeah, totally.
And it's really not. That's why your perspective because it sounds like you've had an iterative approach to this whole process.
It's a learning curve. It's a steep learning curve, especially if you actually want to do anything with it. It's practice makes perfect, that kind of stuff, and then practice shows you where your flaws are.
Okay.
And the biggest thing is you got to be open to learn through everything, through the good times, through the bad. They say there's a catchphrase out there: fail fast, fail early. I don't like that.
Okay.
Because that just says you're giving up, all that kind of stuff. I say if you're going to fail fast, learn from it.
Right.
Learn whatever mistake you made. Keep doing what you're doing. Maybe use a pivot here or there. If you haven't pivoted at least 5 times in a month or something like that when you're first starting off, maybe you're stuck in your ways about something.
Well, I mean, what I noticed as I was preparing for the interview is that you really have stayed with your project. Yeah. And so you've demonstrated at least one of the things that you hear about about entrepreneurship, which is that you got to believe in the problem that you're trying to solve. So you stay true to the whole bicycle concept. Yeah. Is that because it's your baby, or do you really see the end game associated? Because it seems like you're close now.
Yeah. At first, it was my baby type thing, but that actually ended pretty early. My baby, it was ugly. It was butt ugly. And that's even before I did the capstone things. That was my baby time. And it was then where I could kind of see, what the possibilities would be, but I knew I didn't have I'm a computer electrical engineer. I don't know steel. I don't know welding. I don't know any of that kind of stuff.
Right.
So it was one of those, how do I find the people to let me get to that point? And it was other things that I had already had 4 years of research on it. And it's in that 4 years of research, I actually found truth points, things that I can't, even as an engineer, as a scientist, I can't argue with. And when you find stuff like that, you're like, okay, there's something here. There's something I can build off of. And by using that as a core and saying, okay, this is not gonna end up the way I thought it would be.
Right. And these are pivotal points that you're bringing. It's like you've prepared. You're coming to milestones that a lot of people, it's not like you took something easy.
No.
No. And you are learning from each iteration of product. How many iterations would you say that your device has gone through since you started?
I think we're on 7 or 8 now.
Is that right?
7 or 8 of the actual physical design. I think we're on 30 when it comes to the business process of it. The idea originally was going to be, okay, we'll put these out, we'll put bicycles in it, they'll share the bicycles, it'll be great, it'll be wonderful. And then somebody's like, hey, what happens if someone gets hit on the bicycle that you're renting out to them? Liability. So we're like, okay, we got to go sit down with a liability lawyer. Then after sitting down with a liability lawyer, I'm shaking in my, I'm like, oh dear Lord, none of that.
Only in America.
None of that. We're just going to go. That's when you pivot, you change. We actually ended up going backwards to our core of saying, what is this? This is a bike security system.
Right.
Okay, great. It's a bike security system. Can it be used for renting? Can it be used for bike share? Can it be used for all that? Totally. It can definitely be used for all of that. But we're not going to be the one who's going to be facilitating. We're going to facilitate the rack itself.
Right.
Because that's what our core competency is. Right. In this area, and that's how we're going to build this out. And once we did that, a lot of things started falling in place of being like, okay, well, if we have the rack, what's the scalability on that? You know, okay, then you take a look around, you look at all the bike racks around, and you're like, okay, who's the #1 distributor of bike racks?
Right.
You find out that there's this group out of Minnesota that's the #1 facilitator of bike racks. You find out also that it's a $1 billion market. Right. And you're like, okay, I was looking at bike renting market. Turns out bike parking market, bike security market is so much bigger.
Right.
And by 100 fold. And you're like, oh, that's great, you know?
And I think what I find fascinating is that all of the things that you're talking about, this isn't like software. This isn't this isn't the sexy, you know, stuff they're talking about, you know, in all the startup magazines. This is a piece of steel molded, but you've really done something interesting in terms of how you've incorporated technology into a hardened design.
Yeah, I mean, all of our IP is involved in the hardware of it, but we realize that with the growing economy, everybody has smartphones, everybody wants to do stuff, everybody wants to be connected and grab data. Well, how do you do that with this? It's like, we were thinking, oh, kiosk, you know, everything's gonna be piped through a kiosk and it's gonna come back. I was doing, you were saying I was in competitions, I was in the TAG business launch competition.
Right.
And that's when they were like, well, why can't I just use my phone? I just want to use my phone and tap it and make it go and make it do stuff. And I'm like, you can do that now? You know, I didn't know at that point. Wow. So that's when I started looking into it, and the guy's like, well, use a Raspberry Pi. And I'm like, you like a pie? Like you eat? I didn't quite understand. So using my technical background, I went back in and found out all about the technology that's coming out, Raspberry Pis, Bluetooth, RFID readers, all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, wow, this is even better now, because technology is advancing to the point now that we can actually implement this, and it's actually going to help us to be more scalable, more everything. And it was a lot of time spent on chat rooms, a lot of time looking through other people's code, trying to see what worked, what didn't work.
Right.
I took over half my father's garage. I took over a quarter of his basement to be my electronics lab, which there were many nights where he would just sit there and yell down, "Are you going to sleep?" And I'm like, "Yeah, later, whatever," you know, like that. So he'd be like, "All right, just bye." And then it would come down to, okay, we got this part working, we got that part working. And the best thing I can say is to be honest about where you are. We've been to universities before, and we did not have the whole thing working. And we were very honest about, listen, we don't have this part working, but this is where we are. Can you help us out? And they're like, well, you know, when you come back when you have something more. Well, about 3 months ago, we actually got the full thing working with RFID, with Bluetooth. Haven't done solar yet, but that's a whole nother category. We're not even going there yet, but there are possibilities there.
Absolutely.
And so we're in the process now of going back around, but the software stuff, that took maybe 6 months. In the whole last 4 years that I've been building this out, from a college project to the green monster, as we call it now, that was all hardware development and everything. The last 6 months has really been software.
And so all of this started to take place as the Beltline, I mean, chronologically, the Beltline was happening in parallel. Definitely. As you were going through this. So it's almost like serendipity. I'm like, as the Beltline comes along, you're coming up with really something that those businesses that would be a part of the Beltline would need. I mean, even in your example, I don't know where that is, but it looks like that's over General Assembly or over.
That's actually in Midtown. That's right behind the Synergy building in a place called The Garage that just opened up recently in Midtown. And they were thankful enough to allow us to demonstrate this during one of their openings.
Okay.
So, and really great people. Love it. If you ever get a chance to go check it out. There's along with a lot of other entrepreneurship spots that have been popping up around Atlanta. The Gathering spot as well. ATDC's whole remodeling that they've done in there, and now with ATV, WeWork, Rome, spreading out all over. There's all these other places that are building up, and it's great because that means that more entrepreneurs are talking to other entrepreneurs. And the best thing I can say to other entrepreneurs who are thinking about working on a project or something, get out of your house. Go talk to somebody. I would not be where I am if I had not gotten out and gotten to talk to people. The whole reason we have commercial product design is because I literally ran into somebody in the hallway. I was walking through the Synergy building, I came around the corner, bumped right into her, and we started talking, and she's like, oh, I know about this Georgia MEP, which is a Manufacturing Extension Partnership Program, which is government subsidized product design. And I was like, what do you mean by that? You know, is this good? Is this bad? I didn't know at that point. She's like, well, it's great because you don't have to spend so much to get your product designed and made, or just designed out. You just go with these people and it's much lower cost. I'm like, well, that's great. And then talking to another startup in the area as well, I found about a manufacturer locally, which a lot of people say, go to China, go to India, but if you're in the development process of building something out, you got to be there with the manufacturer, step-by-step process, and work with them.
Yeah, so, some of those markets are dangerous for the knockoff cable.
They are. We especially cannot, we can't go to China yet. It's one of those where bike theft is crazy in China. So
agreed.
Yeah,
it's a perfect mixture for.
Although we have been approached, many times by Chinese manufacturing liaison, we've had to politely say no, thank you.
Right.
And I can actually say now that we're patented and everything now too. So that's
the question I have. So is something like this, is it a patent or a copyright? I mean, how do you do? You mentioned a couple of times that your IP is in the hardware design. So you've patented your approach?
Yeah, we've patented our approach on this, and it's a real question you got to have as an entrepreneur. Do I even patent? Do I go down that route, or do I just copyright, or do I not tell anybody? Coca-Cola, great example, never patented. Never wants to be patented. Doesn't need to be patented. Other things like the Swiffer wet jet, crazy thing. The original one was the pad and the stick, and you kind of push the pad around. Every other thing you see on one of those Swiffer wet jet things is its own individual patent surrounding that original stick and pad. I found that on an IP. It was crazy, but it's one of those where you got to really weigh if you want to or not, or if you need to or not.
Right.
With ours, with the structural design and it being steel and it being out in the public, we realized that at some point somebody's going to walk up with a tape measure and figure some stuff out. So, we actually have to patent it. And I tell you, it came down to one claim. We had 20 of them. It came down to one claim. And as long as you get one in, the rest go.
Got it.
But it was, and I got to say, don't use LegalZoom. Stay away from that. If you're gonna get patented, go shell out the big bucks. Go find some.
Be careful, because this is gonna be loaded up on our YouTube channel. They may come after you.
Honestly,
but I mean, I understand. There's a shortcut, and then there's
a short, fast way to do it, and then there's a quality way of doing it. And I mean, if you want to go do that route, fine, go for it. But
when you're dealing with quality, everything is about preserving the intellectual property, because it's got to be solid.
It does.
If you ever have to litigate.
God forbid you don't.
Right. God forbid you don't.
And it's just building it out and being it's one of those where you see it building. Anybody who's had kids or something like that, you see them growing. Same thing with a product. You see it building, and it doesn't look how you think it would, but it still holds the core values that you had with it before. I'm going to turn that off real quick.
No problem. You are a classic example of the bootstrap. I mean, so given everything you've been through, I think you've described this as a 6 or 7 year odyssey.
Yeah.
Where do you see yourself in the next 12 to 24 to 36 months, given that you now have a finished product? The belt line, again, as we go, now that we're in the fall of 2016, 2017 is probably going to be a breakout year for you as it relates to your ability to
knock on wood for that. That'd be great.
But I mean, even the general manager of the hotel, I mean, he expressed some interest. So again, where do you see yourself? I mean, where do you see your product life cycle now that you have a finished prototype and are ready to go?
I see it hopefully being adopted soon. And then being able to start ramping up production. I mean, with the way we've set everything out, it's still going to be evolving, but it's not, the basic design is going to be the same. It's just maybe skinnier here, maybe a little lower here, or tweaked up here, or something like that. But it's going to stay basically the same. And hopefully in the next 6 to 12 months, I can move out of my parents' house. That'd be awesome. when he alluded to bootstrapped, we've done all of this on $65,000.
Okay. Wow.
The entire thing. I had a very nice friends and family. We're able to, the first 4 years was really $50,000, and I've only recently gone back to them to ask for more.
You did a couple of you did a couple of crowdfunding.
Yeah, we did Indiegogo crowdfunding, and we learned from that. It wasn't exactly the most successful. We did get some money from it, but we learned, like, the audience was saying, well, where's it out in the public? Well, I want to see people using it. What's going on there? And so I was like, okay, well, that's what we got to do. From now to the future, we have to get everything tied up to a nice bow where we can get this out in the public and people can use it. Doing that, we found out that the design is intuitive to children.
Okay.
There was one little girl just walked up. We had a bike in the rack, one bike in one of the slots. She just walks up, grabs her little kid bike, pulls down the arm, pushes her bike in. Her mom walks over. What are you doing, honey? She goes, Mom, I'm parking my bike. Come on. And we were scrambling for cameras. Quick, did anybody get that on video? And we're like, oh, no. But it's one of those where it amazes us, the things that come out of this, that we put it out in the public, and the public's reacted and saying that they love it. Not my words. I mean, I love it, but they're saying they love it. And they were saying, well, would you mind paying to park, for it to help out the local economy and everything? And they're saying, well, like, how much? We said $2 a park. Just throw a number out there. They're like, yeah, no, we can totally do that. And I'm like, that's great, but it's one of those where you have to interact with the public, you have to interact with other people, and then test up, down, which way is it gonna go to see what the market's willing to yield. And once you can do that and find out what the market's willing to yield, you can move forward on that process. And that's one of the things we've done consistently, iteratively, as we've been building this out, is what's the market going to accept for this? How can we develop it further out? And when it comes down to bootstrapped, I've got a bow tied up around my head with my bootstraps.
So now what's next for you? Are you, I got a two-part question. Have you spoken to venture, and how receptive are they to an idea like yours? And as you continue to evolve, how do you, now that you've gotten this part out, building a company is the other part of being an entrepreneur, that people don't necessarily, that there's really no rule book. Even being an MBA doesn't prepare you for building a company. So
you ask a room full of entrepreneurs which ones have an MBA, I guarantee you half the room's going to raise their hand. It doesn't matter. But as far as like venture and getting funding, stuff like that, because a lot of entrepreneurs go out for getting funding. We are knocking down doors anywhere we can to get funding, and we say hardware, and people go, we got the cringe back, especially in Atlanta here. Atlanta is very much software oriented, very much app oriented, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
But then we say, well, we have the hardware done. And I talked to a nationally known accelerator, and they said, oh, well, we read your resume and we just don't do hardware. And I said, did you read the part where we said we have the hardware done and we just need the software help?
Okay.
And they're like, oh. So it's a matter of, not only do you have to gear your stuff to the public, what market you're going to sell it to, you got to for the finance part too. Right. And I got to say, most investors will only invest in stuff they're familiar with. And so you're like, okay, how do I get my product to a point that is familiar to investors? And when you have a very new product that no one's ever seen before, it's extremely difficult. So you try to gear it to say, okay, we're going to sell this. We're going to set up all the different types of ways so that as a business, as a startup, we get money from this, because I want to move out of my parents' house. But at the same time, you got to make money for the community,
right? And
you got to make money back for the investor as well, and you got to make money for the person you're selling it to. So the best example I know is a guy at Redbox. They said, we're going to sell it. They had a hard time. They teamed up with Kroger, saying, I'm going to go rent a movie. Oh, wait, didn't I pick up that baby food?
Right.
Next thing you know, they're going into Kroger and they're buying stuff from Kroger.
And then the next thing you know, Verizon is buying Redbox.
Exactly. And the next thing you know, Redbox is blowing up across the nation, because not only did they make money from themselves, they did it for the customer and for everybody else involved. Right. So it's really that community you got to build up.
So you bring up an interesting example. So are you thinking of licensing your product, or would you work with a distributor, or how does that work? Or is that something you've even put some thought into?
We have put thought into it. At first, we were going to do sales just because we need the cash at this point. But definitely licensing down the road, especially with overseas markets, which are so much larger than they are here.
For bicycles,
ridiculous. But yeah, licensing, even getting down to franchising as well, because if you got these in different cities across the nation and everything, I can't be at every single one of them. So, and owner-operator agreements and everything like that. My dad, who's the head of sales, he wants the UC campuses.
Right.
All of those type campuses and stuff like that, he really wants to get out to those. And it's just a matter of getting the word out. I mean, thank you for things like Startup Grind here and everything. Thank you, Michael, for having me out and everything, because this is what a startup needs to be able to get the word out about what they're doing, because otherwise we're just sitting in a garage, sweating in the sort of Georgia heat, even though we do have a fan on us the whole time, and
it's a hot air.
praying to God we don't get eaten by mosquitoes too much.
So now, that being said, I mean, so you've worked with several accelerators. Could I get some feedback from you about that experience? I mean, because there's a lot of them out here.
Yeah.
You've been through that path. What are your thoughts about that?
There's different types of accelerators. Mm-hmm. There's the educational accelerator. That's incubator accelerator. It's an educational type system, which is great, especially when you're just starting out.
Right. But if you don't, some of them end up with like a pitch competition.
Yeah, there's a fast track accelerator, which is like you're already further along, and you see that accelerator coming down, and you're like, okay, we're going to sign up, we're going to go do that. And it's actually just for a short period of time, and you end up pitching afterwards. And it's really about gearing, those accelerators tend to be gearing towards whatever investors they're bringing in.
Right.
Which is great if you're further along down the line. And then there's unique accelerators, like they are only in one type of industry.
Yes.
And it's great as an entrepreneur if you can hit multiples of those, being that your product or idea or service can hit those different avenues. Mm-hmm. But at the same point in time, you get to a point where you have to choose. You can't go to all the events. You can't do all the accelerators due to financial reasons or whatever. And you gotta really pick and choose what you're gonna do. And that's when tough decisions come down.
Right.
I could go do that social function. I could go do that fireside chat. I could go do that parade route. You know, what's gonna be beneficial to my startup to progress it further? And I see a lot of burnout. And it's one of those where you have to find something inside of you to keep that moving along.
So now that you've gotten your product together, are you going to re-engage with that marketplace, or do you think you've gotten the value that an accelerator experience can provide for you?
Some yes and no.
Okay.
Yeah,
fair.
There are a few of them that we will not touch with a 10-foot pole just because it didn't quite work out favorably, not really just for us, but we didn't think it was favorably for the general whole. Like they were still stumbling through some stuff. If they turn things around, maybe. Others we hit consistently, and it's one of those where we didn't get in this year. We'll try again to see if we get in next year. Maybe we weren't further along for them to accept us in. And it's also, what are the costs for some of these? If it's somewhere all I gotta do is write up a thing or do a thing online and submit it, heck yeah. And just throw the name in the hat, because throw the name in the hat. My first pitch to serial entrepreneurs was to Damon John from Shark Tank. And it was all because I went to his pitch event and I literally took my business card and threw it into the bucket when I walked in. And at the end of the pitch, they pulled out 3 names out of the bucket. Mine was one of them. I went up on stage. I got pulled last. First person grabbed the mic. I'm not ready. Put it in the second person, I'm not ready. Hand it to me. Okay, right, I'm supposed to, oh, okay, sure. They're like, you have 3 minutes. And I'm thinking, I've never pitched 3 minutes in my life. I have no idea. All right, screw it. Let's just go ahead and do it. Screw it and do it. Just get it done and go with it. And at the end of it, I got the response of, you're early. And I'm like, yeah, I just started doing this, so. Okay. Go very early. And they're like, well, it's not bad. And for me, that was like validation right there. It's like, okay. I didn't get chewed apart, because I've been watching them chew people apart the entire competition. Didn't get chewed apart, no negative comments. I was like, great, I'm gonna move forward with this. Okay. And it's things like that. You never know what's gonna come along, but you have to be aware of what's happening. And if you have a situation, like I said, throw a name in a hat, just do it. And you can always back out of it. If it's a situation where you just figure out it's not working, you can back out of it. You can just say, listen, this isn't gonna work for me, but but don't disappear. always be honest with where you are and what you're doing.
Right.
And that honesty will translate over to other people. And I had one guy said that he wanted 3,000 units or something like that. And that was 2 years ago. I was like, great. And he's like, yeah, they'll be fully functioning and working and everything right when I order them and they get them in the thing. And I'm like, no. He's like, well, really? You sound like you got it all together there. And I'm like, it may sound like that, but this is what's happening. This is where we are. And he's like, now, when we get done, when we get to that point, can I come back and talk to you?
Got it.
And that's when he was like, you know what? You're honest with me up front. You tell me where you are. Sure. When you get to a point, come back and talk with me. And we're in talks with him now again, so we'll see what happens there,
Exactly. Well, I really do appreciate this conversation. I'd like to maybe have you summarize. We've talked about your experience. Are there any things about what you went through, things that you learned from? Because again, part of what Startup Grind is about is not the really shiny, because again, this is really the flavor of the month. Startup is now getting a lot of energy, but there's an ugly side to it. And it sounds like you've been through several different approaches to this whole thing. What are some of the things you learned, or some of the things that you wouldn't, in hindsight, that you wouldn't do?
Some things that I wouldn't do would pay up front for an accelerator. Don't do that. Yeah, I made that mistake once.
Okay.
Never again. Learn from everybody. Learn from the experienced entrepreneur. Learn from the new entrepreneur. Because there's all types of information out there, and if you try to learn from experienced entrepreneurs all the time, you're missing out on an entirely different viewpoint. And there have been a lot of new entrepreneurs that have surprised the heck out of me. And some made it, some haven't made it. Some are just still struggling along, and some are still, as I like to say right now, things are slow but busy, which is a really weird, I never thought I'd say something like that, but things are happening, but they're slow. And even any opportunity that comes down the pipeline, give it some due diligence. See what's going on there. It could work out, it could not work out, but at least look at it and see what's up. Okay. It's really just about being aware, being honest, and having that drive inside of you that whatever is going on, and you got to have your own fortitude to keep going with it, but at the same point in time, you still have to check yourself to make sure that this is going to do something.
Right.
And that's
realistic.
Be realistic, involve other people that you're going to talk to. Listen.
Okay.
You got to listen to other people.
Well, you've been very open with us, and again, I think that you're going to get where you're trying to go, because again, you've really learned along the way. I see your product. I listen to the evolution of your product. I mean, again, we've talked about a couple of things that hopefully Startup Grind can help you along the way. One more question around. I know you have the engineering and the MBA. What about? And you said your dad is a pure sales guy. From a business development standpoint, are there any things there that you think you might do different?
Actually, I don't know that I can say that. My dad has experience in sales and experience in dealing with selling to people. Plus, then I found out my sister is a graphic designer. She's been helping me out. Her husband as well is another electrical engineer. He's been helping me out. And it's really that community that's been driving. Plus, my mom always wishes you the best for everything you do. So she loves you no matter what happens. It's really just one of those situations where you got to learn.
Got it.
Yeah. If there's anything I can say, it's just you got to learn and apply what you learn, and be open to learning.
Great.
Because otherwise, even your failure could show you something that's amazing that you pivot around and you go for it. But if you're not open to that, you'll never see it, and you'll crash and burn.
Well, I'm actually honored that we had you here, because I anticipate big things from you. I'd like to open up the floor now. I mean, I know we've got some folks here to see if there are any questions that they'd like to lob at you as we approach 45 minutes into the hour. So, do you guys have a few questions? Any questions from the audience?
Yeah.
Could you introduce yourself as well?
Hi, my name is Caroline Dunn. My question is, you went over the hardware aspect of your product. How about the RFID, the software side of it? How does that work for a consumer?
Yeah, there's actually electronic stores here in town that you can go and pick up 90% of the electronics that are involved in my device. Raspberry.
It's all patented, so you're good.
No, that's none of that's patented. That's
Just the hardware patent.
yeah, that's all just open. That's OEM stuff. That's all over the counter stuff. And it's one of those where we're technology agnostic. So we found out about Raspberry Pis, and I've been going on chat rooms and stuff like that. And as long as I make sure that I credit the people who may have come before me and wrote some bit of code that I'm using, which I make sure to do all the time, it's one of those where I reach out to the community to find out how to do stuff. The program that I'm using right now is something I found through a chat room of someone, but then went back and completely modified it for the situation that I'm using. And it's that technology, the stuff that's in this is cutting edge because it's actually just coming out now. The Raspberry Pi 2 is what we have in there, but it's also, you could use a Raspberry Pi Zero, Adrenos. All of that technology is just now coming out, but it's great because we're being able to use it in our product. Now, that's great for a short product run, maybe 500 units. When you get up to the 1,000 unit range, mass production, that's when you have to go to the board manufacturers, the guys that actually build this stuff out, and contract with those guys to have a separate board made because it's going to be mass produced. But when you're still trying to figure out what you want to do, those are the Pis, the Adrenos, all that kind of stuff are great for figuring out what you want to do, how you want it to do. So when you do go to that board manufacturer, you're not just like, hey, I want you to do some stuff. You know exactly what you want, exactly how you're going to get it, and you can work with them much faster, much quicker. But yeah, no, I mean, Micro Center down the way, it's just, you can go down, there's a back room, you can pick up 90% of the electronics that we do. Otherwise, we ship in across the country from one other electronic that we use. And it's just because it was a solution that we found.
Thank you. Yes.
So business model, will you ultimately sell this to, you mentioned the Beltline, could it be retailers that might perhaps buy these and then see that as a revenue opportunity for them?
Yeah, we're doing it as it's a platform business model. So we're selling it to the property, and then we set up maintenance and service contracts with the property for that to be able to, they can charge for parking. So like $2 a park, well, through the app, it would be like, oh, we grab maybe like a small percentage of it. The rest of it goes back to the property.
So you'll even provide payment processing?
Yeah, payment processing and everything like that. And it's because that way they can charge for parking if they want to. But also we found out that cyclists, people who ride around on bicycles a lot, spend about $250 a month on the surrounding community. But they don't ride as much around here because they can't lock up their $1,000 bikes safely.
Anecdotal evidence. On Sunday, riding through Atlanta, I think we spoke about that earlier.
Yeah.
We were going to go into a store. Mm-hmm. And guess what? Someone had to stay out and watch the bikes.
Yeah.
That was me.
Caroline and her husband, my wife and I, and their cousin.
Yeah.
We all had to figure out who gets to go in and watch the bikes. And one had, you showed, they had a simple bike lock, and we all thought, no, I don't know if that's going to work.
Exactly.
And so had we had a place that we could park it, we'd feel comfortable to go in.
Yeah, and that's the other thing is like with these locations, with these racks, we can do advertising in the app and advertising on the rack itself. But the idea is to push the access for the brick and mortar past its walls. So we can even get, being technology agnostic and further down iterations, active Wi-Fi hotspots.
Yeah, like I saw that in some of your material. I mean, the sponsorship piece is really exciting, and I'm just going to toss this out for the paid parking market, general parking, these guys. This is a nice uplift for them. Yeah. So if you already got a parking lot down the middle of downtown,
so linear parking.
You need this to complement.
Yes, it is a complement to the parking. Apartment complexes as well can offer it as a service to their tenants. Correct. I've talked to some recently, they just have a room in the back that they put the bikes in. And that's like, well, wouldn't it be nice if you secured them? And they're like, oh yeah, that'd be a good idea. And
passive revenue stream as well.
Passive revenue stream for them as well. The whole community gets uplifted. And we build it out so as a subscription even for the cyclist. The cyclist's like, oh great, I'm paying $2 a park, what do I get? I get the security out of it. That's great. But, I got to use my app every time. It's like, oh, great. Well, you sign up with a subscription with us, we'll give you a key card. No more app. That's why you just take out your billfold and just tap it. And that way the system will lock up, and now on the online platform, you get access to whatever deals are in the area, that maybe the person going and parking their car wouldn't be able to.
Right, digital coupons. As a matter of fact, in some of your material that's online, you talk about signage that can be leveraged on the device itself and on several parts of it at different tiers. And you don't talk about that, but that I think is also a very exciting opportunity for for the cyclists and for the people who come to a business and having it be right out there. It's like a billboard.
The idea is that we wanted to get like outside of Ponce City Market. So the minute you go in and park your bike, you can pull your app out, click it, and it's like, oh, here's the deals that are happening in Ponce City Market.
Right.
Or whatever shopping complex it is. And it's a way to facilitate you, the cyclist, to make your experience better, but it's also to help the community so that they can ensure that security in their patrons to come out and use their area, their businesses, but also to build the community up as a whole, and also to get me moved out of my parents' house. It's imperative. Like, bootstrapped is a key thing in that, because it's, oh man, I love them to death, but I
think with your enthusiasm, you're going to get to your goal. Are there any other questions from the audience, from the other entrepreneurs out here? Okay, well listen, thank you again, Tad. I mean, again, good luck to you. I appreciate you coming out tonight, and again, I give you all the goodwill that I can, any other resources that Startup Grind can bring to the table. I appreciate you taking your time out tonight, and I'm sure you'll do well.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on here.
No problem, thanks.